Hello, Garland Nixon here, and it's Sunday afternoon, I guess. And Donald Trump had a press conference and claimed victory. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about the current state of affairs regarding what I believe will be a debacle, and why I believe that most of the pundits, that the majority, that 90% of the pundits are wrong. And when I say pundits, I mean a lot of people on YouTube. I think two guys I think got it mostly right, and that's Larry Johnson and I. So let's talk. So what's happened so far? What has happened? Let's review what happened. The United States government launched a kind of one of these blitzkrieg attacks. They love to do that stuff, like Israel or the US. They love these blitzkrieg attacks, right? They look good in the press. Oh man, we landed a big punch, right? So they did this and they captured an individual. Okay. They captured President Maduro, and they're bringing him to the United States and, charging him with things like owning a machine gun in a country that has a standing army. You're going to you're going to charge the president of a country that has a standing army with possessing a machine gun. In other words, you might as well charge him with exposing himself to a blind person, right? It's absurd, preposterous. Okay, but that's obvious. All right. But that's what's happened, right? They have sometimes they'll call it a decapitation strikes, shock and awe. It's supposed to be this big thing that scares and horrifies the brown people in this country, be they Muslims or, people in Venezuela or whatever, right? You're scaring and horrifying these people, or even the Russians, right? They're kind of honorary brown people at times. You're going to scare and horrify these people, and they're going to acquiesce to your needs. Of course, it never works. But for some reason, people think it worked this time because, hey, Trump said so in a press conference. So we know it's all going to work, right? Now, here's my point. I've heard this thing. People are saying regime change. Regime change. They did regime change. No, they didn't do regime change. They kidnapped the president, just like they did in 2002. They kidnapped Hugo Chavez in 2002. Millions of people came to the street. They ended up having to give him back, right? So here we are. It always shocks me, the gullibility of Americans, that like Trump or somebody can have a press conference and say something and people will all think it's true. And then they'll all move forward and have a discussion about it as though it's a substantive, as though what Trump said was somehow substantive and we should go with that. All right. Now, what did Trump say? A number of things, but one of the things he said was an obvious lie. He says, yes, I already spoke with the new vice president. And basically, she's going along with what we're saying, and we're going to work things out, and we're going to send stuff over, and she's going to acquiesce to our needs, which, as a person who's been in Venezuela, who's met Delcy Rodriguez, I don't know if you know, her father was tortured to death by the CIA. Immediately, I'm like, well, let's see. From a guy who told us that he had a phone call with Modi, and in that phone call, Modi said, yeah, I'm going to stop buying Russian oil. And he said, yes, I had a phone call with Modi, and he told me he was going to stop buying Russian oil. And Modi was like, crap, I don't know what he's talking about. I never had a conversation. So and that's the same conversation. The conversation that Trump had with Modi, that's the same exact conversation they had with Delcy Rodriguez, one that only exists in Trump's mind. So, okay, well, let's see what happened. Let's look and see what the Venezuelans are saying. This is from a Venezuelan media outlet, and I'm going to read what's going on in Venezuela. So here's what we're supposed to think right now. If we're what we're supposed to believe, the neocon version is that President Maduro is a dictator, and if you remove him, the whole rest of the country will just fall, right? Like Iran. All we got to do is strike one night, and then we will do a decapitation strike and take out some of the military leaders in Iran, and Iran will just fall apart. Yeah. And then remember what Trump did? He had a press conference. Israel like blew up some things, killed some generals, attempted to kill the president, tried to kill some people. And then Trump came out and stuck his chest out the next day with a press conference. Yes, Israel, I knew all about it. It was my thing. I was in on it. They took Iran. Iran has fallen and we're going to go. We're in control of Iran. Ha, ha, ha. We won. How'd that work out? I don't understand why Americans are so gullible, why all Trump has to do is have a press conference and another one where he says, yes, we won. We have completely defeated this country and now it's all ours. And 12 days later, didn't work out so well, right? Anyway, let us continue. Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, denounced. Wait a minute. They told us they talked to her, and she said, "I'm going along, and you can have the oil. Come on over. Hey, I can't wait to meet the puppets, the oil puppets that you send over, so we can just acquiesce to everything. We're dissolving the government. Isn't that what we're supposed to believe?" Let's read what they say. Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, denounced an unprecedented U.S. military aggression against Venezuela that culminated in the illegal kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and First Fighter Lady Celia Flores. Vice President Rodriguez, accompanied by senior officials, I thought they were all gone, headed an emergency meeting of the National Defense Council, recalling that the Venezuelan government had already warned about an ongoing aggression under false excuses. The vice president emphasized that the true objective of this operation is regime change in Venezuela, which will allow the United States to, quote, capture our energy, mineral, and natural resources, unquote. She called on the international community to be aware of this truth. Gee, it doesn't sound like she talked to Marco Rubio and she's giving things up like Trump said, does it? Let me continue. It sounds like she's doing what Garland said, but let's continue. The vice president of Venezuela demanded the release of Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores during the National Defense Council. I thought Trump said he was on the phone with her, and she was just going to say, yes, you can have all the oil. What do you want next? That's not what she's saying, is it? Perhaps, do you think maybe it's just like the Modi phone call that didn't happen? Possibly Trump was lying to us? Nah, with Donald Trump. Would the U.S. government lie to us about like weapons of mass destruction and stuff? I don't think so. Anyway, the vice president of Venezuela demanded the release of Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores during the National Defense Council, reaffirming Maduro as the sole president, and at the same time, listen to this, announcing the activation of the Citizen Security Agency and national power to defend independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, which they denounce as attacked. Why does this sound a little bit different than Trump's press conference? You know, I remember a press conference back in June when, let's see what happened. Everybody's saying, oh, this is like Syria. Perhaps Garland will use a different event. Not Syria. I'm going to use a different event. Last June, Israel launched an attack, a so-called decapitation strike attack on Iran, did they not? And similarly to this, they were able to use technology and all other kind of things to suppress Iran's air defense system and military capabilities for about 8 to 12 hours. At which point, Donald Trump and others went to, I even had people call me, they did it. You see, they overthrew Iran. And I'm like, dude, it's only been a few hours. Yeah, but they did a decapitation strike and the Iranians, and it's over and they won it. And I'm like, not so fast there, Speedy. Let's see what happens. What did I keep saying yesterday? We're only 24 hours out. Let's not be so quick, okay? Let's not be so fast. Let's not be so hurried to decide, right? So I will continue. So, 8 to 12 hours out, within about a day and a half, Donald Trump gave a similar press conference where he pretty much declared victory for Israel and said he knew about it and he was all part of it and all of that. And all of the pundits over here said Israel has won, and everybody and a lot of my friends, and oh, that's it. And people called me, and all there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. But being a man who studies Zen, my position is not so fast. Let's try to give this thing a little bit of time and see how it works out. It actually worked out in 12 days. But for the first 24 to 48 hours, Israel had won. They were defeated. Why? Because this mentality in the West that all you got to do is punch somebody in the face and they'll drop. And then once they fall, they'll just come, oh, please don't hit me anymore. Take my wallet and anything. That's not the nature of these people. That's not what the Iranians were ever going to do. And that ain't what the Venezuelans going to do. Right? So my experience from being in Venezuela, and I said prior to this, they will fight, and they will fight tooth and nail. So now let me add this. You know, one of the things from being in investigations that I had to teach investigators when I taught it was this: beware of two things. Number one, beware of making assumptions. Number two, there's only one thing, and there's nothing wrong with assumptions, as long as they're controlled, as long as you know it's an assumption. The problem with an assumption is when you make an assumption and then you believe that it's true, and then you act as though it's true when it hasn't been proven with empirical evidence, data, and observation. So we have all of these people saying, it's obvious. It was sold out. The government was sold out. The military was sold out. Everybody was sold out. It isn't obvious. Nothing is obvious yet. The same thing that happened in Iran happened here. They were able to, so only Venezuela on a much smaller scale, they were able to suppress the air defenses, suppress the military temporarily, and they were able to go in and they were able to do a kidnapping, or what they call a decapitation strike. Was that the end? Was that the end, or was that the beginning? In a fight, the guy that throws the first punch, and he might land the first punch, that don't mean the fight's over. But what did we hear? Well, that's it. It's over. Well, boy, the Iranians, it's done for. They're done for. They're finished. But they weren't, were they? And now what do we hear? Well, just like in Iran, the U.S. was able to suppress the air defense, suppress the military, and take a military action, which the United States can do that. The U.S. has the technology. The U.S. has the military firepower to launch some kind of a blitzkrieg power attack. But do they have staying power? The only way you can find out is over time. Now, let me continue. So Trump went on to basically say, hey, we're going to run the country. And I heard all of these people, they're going to run the country. They're going to put Marco Rubio in charge. Oh, they're going to put they're going to put all these people in charge. Not if the Venezuelans don't say yes. Right now, the Venezuelans have said, okay, now listen to this. Listen to this. Now, we'll continue with the statement of what's going on in Venezuela. The Venezuelan people, following Maduro's call, also mobilized in the streets. The people of Venezuela have taken to the streets following a previous call by Maduro for the activation of the FAN-B and the Bolivarian militias. Now, recall, that's what I said would happen. That if you punch them, they got millions of people, they got brown uniforms, been there, saw them, talked to them, who are ready to fight and who are armed. Right? So their military and their militias, which are millions of people, are now saying, okay, time to fight the gringos, right? They're not saying, hey, let's just lay down and give them the oil. They're saying, all righty, you stole Maduro. You took our property. We want him back and we're ready to fight. Likewise, Vice President Rodriguez announced the activation of a decree signed by President Maduro, which has been delivered to the President of the Supreme Court of Justice for its constitutional endorsement in the Constitutional Chamber. This decree of external commotion is expected to obtain judicial approval in the coming hours for its immediate execution. Let's see, anything else? She affirmed the governments of the world are impacted by the attack, which she attributed a Zionist tint, calling it really shameful. Rodriguez quoted the liberator Simon Bolivar from the Jamaica letter. The veil has been torn. We have already seen the light, and they want to return us to darkness. The chains have been broken. We have already been free, and our enemies intend to enslave us again. She emphasized that Venezuela, quote, will never again be a colony of any empire. The vice president recalled the recent statements by President Maduro, who just 2 days ago publicly ratified the government's willingness to maintain dialogue relations to address the constructive agenda. She pointed out that the aggression of the U.S. flagrantly violates Article 1 and 2 of the Charter of the United States, despite the fact that Maduro had extended his hand to the American people to establish diplomatic, political, institutional channels of the state based on the well-being of the people's friendship, cooperation, respect for international legality. So she said, we tried to talk to him, but we will be free, and we will never again be a colony. Now, just like June, I understand people are interesting creatures. I ain't one of those people who live with a short-term view of things. Just like June, and trust me when I tell you this, I fielded phone calls in June on that Thursday or Friday, whatever day it was, that said, it's over. You see, the Israelis did it. Garland, I told you they were going to do it. I told you they were going to overthrow the government, and you said they couldn't do it. I told you that the U.S. and Israel were going to take Iran, and they were going to take the government out, and this and that. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa. It's only been 1 day, and they've launched an attack, and this thing ain't over. 12 days later, it was over, wasn't it? Let's not be so fast. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to make my predictions in the same way. Let me say this, that for the last 15 years, we've been told over and over that the U.S. will join in the fight in Ukraine, and the Russians will be stopped, and then all of NATO will be in. And look, what did I do? I made a video, and the name of that video was the Samsonite option. I said, like hell. I said, what's going to happen in Ukraine is when the war's lost, the U.S. will pack their bags and get the hell out. The Europeans don't understand that, but they'll find out. Once the war is lost, the United States is good at losing wars. Go back and look at it 2 years ago. And I said, they'll pack their bags, they'll steal every dime they can. And a bunch of leaders, I said, it'll be just like Ashraf Ghani in Afghanistan. It'll be the same thing in Afghanistan. Go back and look at it. It's called the Samsonite option. I said, what happened with him? He was packing money in, and he was driving, and money was falling out of the vehicle as he was heading for the tarmac to get on a plane and get the hell out of the country. And that's what will happen in Ukraine. And, oh, Garland, you're crazy. And Trump will know. The U.S. military will join in, and it'll be World War. That's not the hell it won't. The U.S. will get the hell out of there. They're going to steal every dime they can. They're going to launder every penny they can, and then they're going to get the hell out. And I don't know if let me just say this. And in case you're not watching in Kiev and London and Berlin, let this be a lesson to you. They're already out. They're like, oh my gosh, we've lost the war in Ukraine. Hey, look, there's oil in Venezuela. Have a nice day, guys. Bye-bye. That's what they're doing. Clear. So I'll say it again here. I don't understand why all it takes for Americans is a press conference from Trump to think that the war is over and the Venezuelans have acquiesced. Well, remember this video. That's what I'm going to tell you. Remember this video. Trump and the U.S. has done nothing but kidnapped one person. You see, if you think that what Trump said was correct, that means that you buy into the neocon mentality that says Maduro's a dictator. Well, then all you have to do is get rid of the dictator, don't you? And then the people will come out and say, yay, you got rid of our dictator. Thanks. Come steal our oil. But he wasn't a dictator. He got 64% of the vote continuously. Might I add, the people in Venezuela have been ruled by the Americans before, and they know what neoliberal feels like, and they neoliberalism, and they ain't going to do it again. They're going to fight. That's what they're going to do. That's my position. Okay. This is Trump. He's on an aircraft carrier with a mission accomplished goal, with a mission accomplished banner behind. Oh, look at that. They defeated Iraq. This is Trump. Oh, yes. Look what's happened to Iran. Israel has defeated them, but not really. And now this usual thing. We have a big Hollywood production of SEAL Team 6 or whoever these people are going in and kidnapping somebody. And then Trump does his spiel. He does his spiel on TV. It tells lies. Yes. We've talked to Venezuela and they've given up. Yeah, that don't sound like that to me. It ain't giving up. They ain't giving up. Okay. So here's a question. If you're making assumptions about what's going to happen next, if you're making assumptions about what happened, they were sold out, they were bought out. You know, it's interesting. Oh, I remember when I used to do national news, right? I used to do national TV. And one of the things that I learned, because it happened to me, one morning I went on Fox and Friends and I took a position. And it was, interesting and different. And I noticed something. The rest of the day, I'm watching the news and people kept using that phrase that I use. And I realized something, that if somebody early in the morning on national news says something, then for the rest of the day, people in the news will all repeat it. All say yes, or we'll repeat what was said. It's like they set a precedent and everybody else is too lazy to say something else or not imaginative or creative enough to come up with another possible angle. And everybody just repeats this. Okay. So apparently early in this game, after it happened, somebody came out and said, oh, they were it's obvious that the Maduro was sold out by everybody around it, which was an assumption, which I'm not saying it's true or false. I'm saying it was an assumption. And then everybody from then on said, it's obvious that he was sold out. And I'm like, no, it ain't. It is an assumption that he was sold out. That's what it is. I'm not saying that he was. I'm not saying that he wasn't. I'm saying that one of my pet peeves with people, period, is that people make assumptions and pretend as though the assumptions are factual when they have not been proven, number one. So we don't know. Does the United States have the capability to knock out somebody's air defense? Because they were like, yes, but they just flew right in. Well, we don't know. It was a bombing that wasn't ready for. There was probably cyber attacks. Some of the air defense was hitting the area. They were in the process of bombing. People were down, had their heads down. I don't know. Is it possible that somebody was sold out? That is possible. Do we have definitive evidence? No. And I will never say, I know that for a fact. That's one of my pet peeves, when people say they know something for a fact and they don't know it for a fact. I believe that we are, as usual, in the crisis of epistemology. What is epistemology? How do I know what I know? If I say he was sold out, you should say to me, Garland, he was sold out. Yes. How do you know that? And I should be able to say, I know that. If I'm just guessing or speculating and I should say, I think he was sold out, but the jury is still out because we don't have an evidence. I hate it when people pretend as though they have evidence. They don't. It's possible. You can say it's likely. You can say, I don't think it is. I think it's unlikely. It doesn't matter. We have no evidence of that yet. So let's not pretend as though we do. You can make arguments. Well, it seems like it for this reason. Fair enough. Well, it seems like it because that happened and this happened. No problem with you saying, presenting evidence to me. Yes, Garland, but this happened and that happened. Fair enough. Present your evidence to me and tell me, I think it happened. But there's nothing worse as an old investigator, as a former investigator, than an investigator saying, I know it happened. Major Nixon, we know that happened in this investigation. And Major Nixon's going to say, okay, all right, give me the file. I want to read the report, and in that investigation report, I want to see something that says, it tells me that you know that it happened. And once I read that, I'll say, I know it happened too. But if you say, well, it appears that it happened because of this and that and this, I'm going to say you better change it. And you better say, we think that happened. It's unproven yet. Don't go to a court. You're going to go to a court and try to prosecute somebody? Your Honor, what happened? Well, we kind of think it might have happened. You're going to lose the case because you got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty. Unless maybe it's just a civil case, then you only got to prove 51%. So then, and even then, 51% means that preponderance of the evidence. So in a civil case, you still don't have to prove that it definitely happened. You only have to prove that it most likely happened. That's my point. Was he sold out? There's some evidence that maybe he was, but we don't know as of yet for sure. Right? And if somebody, and here, just make my point. Make my point for me. It's obvious. He makes my point for me. It's obvious. Really? Can you prove it? Other than giving circumstantial evidence? Circumstantial evidence don't prove it. It ain't obvious. It is an assumption. It is a speculation. That's what it is. And I don't know as an investigator how many times I saw things that were obvious, that were there's no possible way that any reasonable person would say, no, that's not what happened. It's clear that's the killer. That's the guy that committed the crime. And next thing you know, you find out that the guy was in friggin' North Carolina and he couldn't have did it. And you're like, damn, it was obvious. I was ready to give that guy 20 years. So because I've been down that road before, I can tell you nothing is obvious until you have conclusive data. But that's fine. That's why I'm making this video to say that I ain't a speculator. Well, excuse me. Yes, I do speculate. But what I don't do is pretend that speculation is proven fact. That's what I don't believe in. But I don't want to go too far with that. Okay. So let's continue. So we now have a country, the neocon version is all we have to do is get rid of one person, and all we have to do is do a decapitation strike and the country will fall apart. Yeah, like it did in Iran. Just like it did in Iran. Boy, that worked so well in Iran. Decapitation strike. Oh, wait, it did it. But if you listen to Trump's press conference, you would have surely believed it. And the same people who, after the press conference, were saying to me, well, look, Garland, you were wrong. You know what you're talking about. Israel's been successful and they've done it. And you thought Israel couldn't do it. And then 12 days later, they're like, ooh, boy, this crow sure tastes delicious. Give me another helping. And now I say this. So now the president has been captured, kidnapped. The vice president is in charge. The institutions are still running the same. The government's still running the same. Everything's still running. What have you accomplished? You have kidnapped someone. The governments are all looking, saying, holy crap. The government of Mexico, the government of Colombia, even the government of Brazil, all of the governments that you're threatening, Cuba, all of these governments are saying, uh-oh, we got a problem here. The United States is on a rampage, and all of them are saying we better prepare because they're going to try to take us out. And what they'll also say, now, I would be willing to bet you this. Only because last time I was in Caracas, there were people from a lot of other socialist countries and socialist organizations there basically saying, if the gringos come, we'll all come in here to fight them. So what now? How do you run a country when you didn't? What's different than 3 days ago, other than there's a different person who's the president now? What is different that's going to allow you to run the country that's different than it was 3 days ago? Maduro's gone. If you're a neocon, you're like, he was a dictator, so the country's just going to fall now. Ha, ha, ha. Yeah, right. But if you're a person who's intelligent, you're going to say, they still got a president and everything still is intact. So if you want to run things, it's always the same thing. You're going to have to go in with troops and seize the capital. You're going to have a ground war. Russia has a powerful, powerful ground army, an experienced ground army with centuries, literally centuries of experience in ground war. The United States ain't a ground war, a fighter. The United States is not a ground army. The United States flies over and drops bombs and does decapitation strikes and kidnaps the president and does things like that. But to put a bunch of troops on the ground and to go forth and to take things. Now, what did Trump even say? We're not afraid of boots on the ground. You know what? The fact that he said we're not afraid of boots on the ground means that they're afraid of boots on the ground. Number one. Number two, he says we're ready for more strikes if necessary. Okay, you did strikes. And all you got was one guy. So what? You know, I did a video about that. And I said the difference between, let me ask you this. Here's the difference. Did Russia do strikes on Ukraine? Is that what they did? We're going to do strikes on Ukraine and wait for the government of Kiev to fall. No, they didn't. They did strikes, but the strikes were in conjunction, right? It was, we're going to do bombs and missiles. We're going to do artillery. We're going to do ground troops. All of those things are going to work together in the war effort, or as they call it, the special military operation. They didn't sit back in Moscow and say, let's throw some long-range weapons at Kiev and wait for them to give up. It said, we understand that the only way to win a war is to win a war. So their position in Russia, in Ukraine was, we are going to strike some targets, and then we're going to send in the troops, and we're going to take village by village. Right? What they're going to do, what did they do in World War II when the Nazis pushed all the way into, to near Moscow? They pushed them all the way back. They took, I think, 1,846 towns and villages and stuff, everything in their way. They took it all the way back to Germany, right? They knew if we're going to win, we have to win a ground war. What did they are a ground war. They understand continental war. The United States sends some planes over to bomb. The last time we did a ground war of any consequences was Iraq. Which ultimately, where did that end up? In a disaster, being there for years and years. A so-called ground war in Afghanistan, where we lost to a bunch of local guys running around in flip-flops with AK-47s. We lost it. Then we're going to take the Houthis out with strikes. We couldn't beat the Houthis. In a war with strikes. What did we do? Strikes. Why? Because we weren't putting people on the ground going into Yemen. You think we're putting people in the ground going into Venezuela? Good. Best of luck with that. Right? And what are we going to do? Do you think that somebody mentioned proxies? Where's the proxies in South America? What South American country we got that we're going to be able to send in 200,000 or 100,000? And by the way, even if we could, they got millions of people armed. And do you think that the South Americans of another country are going to come in and fight for us in Venezuela? What we're already destabilizing the region. And might I add, 1 million people would show up at our border. We have 1 million people showing up at our border. If we have some kind of a war going on in Venezuela, 1 million or 2 million people show up at our border. Okay. And last time I checked, Venezuela is the size of France and Germany combined. So just this, we're not talking about a town, a city. We're talking about a massive jungle-covered country. And the last time I checked, we had 16,000 troops. Okay. All right. Let's just do this. Let's give the United States the benefit of the doubt. Let's triple them. 45,000 troops. In that country? In jungles? And the number of people to be bitten by snakes would probably be thousands. But even then, I think that the American people will not be thrilled if body bags start to come up. Trump said we're not afraid to send in troops. I think he is. And you're going to send in troops during the midterms, and body bags are going to come home during the midterms? That's obliteration to the Republicans. Now, not that it matters because the Democrats are, lowly scum and neocon warmongers. But here's the bottom line. They would use that to crush you. And then the warmongering Democrats, they'd impeach Trump over Ukraine. Hey, you're not sending enough weapons to Ukraine. Why aren't we over there in a war with Russia and China at the same time? Right? The bottom line is this. you know good and damn well this thing will go very, very bad if you send troops in quickly for you. And when the bodies come over, Trump, you're done. And I think he's kind of done anyway right now. But here's the other part of it. You could say he's a lame duck, but the issue of Trump is irrelevant to some extent, because George W. Bush kidnapped the president of Venezuela in 2002. That didn't do any good. They kidnapped Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who was the president, the legitimate president of Haiti. I mean, this is not Trump. This is the U.S. empire. This is what they've done over and over again. Trump is following in a long tradition of emperors who just say, "Oh, all right, we'll just completely violate international law and kidnap the leader of a country." That's old school. That's the British do that stuff. But ultimately, where Trump is now, he says, we're going to pump the oil. How are you going to do it? If the Venezuelans say no, and right now the Venezuelans say no. And even though the brainwashed American public thinks that you did a regime change and that you somehow magically control the Venezuelan government, you didn't do a regime change. You kidnapped an individual who is immediately replaced by another individual. Just like the Iranians said, "Oh, look at that." In fact, Venezuela Israel had a lot more success against Iran. Remember? In that instance, they killed a bunch of their leaders, like a whole bunch of leaders of the Iranians military, some members of the government. They did actually do somewhat of a decapitation strike where they killed a whole bunch of leaders and really completely knocked out their air defense system throughout most of the country for about 12 hours. In about 12 hours, the air defense system was up. It wasn't the best, but it still was an air defense system. And the people who were killed were replaced, and Iran commenced to kicking butt. So if you think that the war is over, I think we will have a talk in about 30 to 60 days again. I'm going to refer back to this video. And for all of those who thought the war was open with the kidnapping of one person, I'm going to say, in the words of Kool Moe Dee, "How you like me now?" Right? I'm going to say, I tried to tell you, this is just not that easy. That there's no possibility. You know, when I was there 5 years ago, the people there then kind of knew this was going to happen. They have been preparing for it. Now, here's what I have to say. The U.S. can fly over and bomb. The U.S. can do that. And I think they understand that that's what the U.S. has the ability to do. They can fly over, they can bomb. They can do that. But to take the oil fields, they're going to control the country. They're going to have to put in troops on the ground to fight. There's no other way around that. Venezuelans ain't buying into it. They're not going to go down. They've said, "Look, our president is Maduro. You got to return our president." Well, we want to run a country. Our president is Maduro. You got to return our president. Our government's their government's still intact. The whole government's still intact. So what is Trump going to do now? Okay, we're going to bomb. Okay, you bomb. Their government's still intact. Then what? At what point do you say, if we're going to run a government, we've got to put troops on the ground? Because that's where you ultimately always get to. Ultimately, you get to that. And I don't think, we don't have the troops to do it. And I don't think Trump can do it. Maybe he can. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think, but if he does, what happens if he does it and they get hit hard? And I think they will. I think the Venezuelans are ready to fight. And I also would say this: if I'm Colombia and Americans show up in Venezuela, knowing that Trump also threatened Colombia, I'm just going to clandestinely open the floodgates. Like the the FLN and these other. I'm going to say, "Hey guys, I'm just saying, there's a border over there, and there's some Americans coming in, and they're threatening me too. So I'm just saying, if some of these militias would want to cross the border to go over there and fight the Americans, I probably wouldn't make any noise. In fact, I'd probably provide you with a few extra guns and some ammunition. Say, ease on across the border in the jungles, and a couple 100,000 of you want to go over there and help fight the Americans. Hey, I didn't see anything. It just could happen." So I'm just saying, Any event that the Americans send in troops, which I don't think they will, they'd have a fight on their hands, and it wouldn't just be Venezuelans. So let's see where we are in a week. Let's see if in 1 week that this business of America owns the oil and we're going to start pumping the oil, that is your ultimate goal. The question is, how do you get there? You know, that's the question. How do you, your goal is to get the oil. How do you get there? Because what do you have to do? You have to have people there who are work for the oil companies. They have to go there. They have to live there. So what are they going to do? Live in the region in hotels or build something for them? So where the oil fields are, you have to have a lot of workers. The workers have to live in the area. You have to bring things in. You have to then pump the oil. You have to then take it across the country or wherever you're taking it to the shipping areas. And then you have to load it on the ships at the ports. And you have to do all of those things. And I'm supposed to believe that the United States is going to be capable of doing that against the will of the acting government. I don't believe the acting government's going to give them the go ahead. Sure, just come stay in our countries and steal all our oil. And by the way, now what did they say? We will not be a colony of another country, which means no, which means you can't take the oil. You have to fight the whole time. We've got the oil fields. What are we doing? Well, we're constantly at war to keep the oil fields. It ain't worth it. And they may just say, well, if you own the oil fields, we'll continue to attack the oil fields with drones and different things like that. What are you going to do? You've got to go to the oil fields. You've got to drive through these mountainous jungle regions. You think there may, I'm just throwing this out, you think there may be on the odd occasion assault troops, and you got to drive past these towns, small towns in the mountains where everybody's armed to the freaking teeth, where the government has given them all a bunch of AK-47s and machine guns. You drive back there, you're gonna get lit up everywhere you go in this country. How and would you do that? Hey, we got a job for you. What? We want you to work in the oil fields in Venezuela. Oh, what's it going to be like? Well, you probably get shot at every day. The odds are, you know, if you leave the oil field, you'll get shot. And by the way, when you're at the oil fields, there'll probably be people taking pot shots at you all day long. No thanks. Dying, in the words of the outlaw Josie Wales, dying ain't no way to make a living. So I don't see the options of there. I am going to pay attention to what's happening. I'm not going to make some early assumption 24 to 48 hours in that we have been successful. You know, Iran part 2. The Israelis won. They launched a decapitation strike. It's all over for Iran. But it wasn't, was it? Now we got the same thing again. Ooh, Trump has won. He had his version of a decapitation strike. And now we get the, yeah, okay. All right. Fair enough. Come talk to me. Let's see where we are in a week. Let's see where we are in 2 weeks. Let's see where we are in 3 weeks. Now, Trump said, I'm going to do more strikes. In other words, bomb. Even then, you can do more strikes. You can't get the oil doing strikes. So let's see what happens with that. I'll say this, that Americans and Westerners don't understand the concept of armed struggle and fighting, right? So here's what they say. Okay, they flew over and they bombed and they took, they kidnapped some guy, right? Okay. And there's a book right behind me called People's Army, People's War. It's about from General Giap, and it's how they defeated the French in Vietnam. And the first thing that they understood was they have advantages. And the advantages are they can fly over and bomb us. Those are their advantages, but that don't mean they win the war. That we need other advantages that we have. Number one, we live here. Number two, we can hit them anywhere. We can fight them anywhere. And number three, we got time. You got the watches, we got the time. So someone said, oh, they are not protecting their resources. They haven't started to protect their resources. You don't know that they can't protect their resources because they haven't started to protect their resources. The United States kidnapped Maduro. The United States has not attempted to grab the resources. I believe They can very well protect their resources because ultimately, you know, my brother was military, passed away. He always said in the end, you got to have a soldier on the ground with a rifle. If you want to hold territory, you got to have soldiers on the ground with a rifle. If they want to hold the territories, any territories, if they want the oil fields or whatever, they're going to have to put soldiers on the ground with rifles. That's what I have to say. So Garland's prediction, as it were, is number one, if you send anybody in, they're going to get shot up, shot at, whatever. What does that mean? We got to send more people in who get shot up and shot at or whatever, which means you got to send more people in. See, the more people you send in, the more problems you have, the more you have to fight. Well, what did Trump say? Well, you know, if we have to do more strikes, we will. Wait a minute. You just told me you won. And you just told me, let's think about this. Trump said, if we have to do a group of strikes, we will. Wait a minute. You just told me that you've got Maduro. You just told me that you talked to the vice president and she's ready to let you run the country. Why would you bring up more strikes if you've already won? Doesn't that kind of imply, number one, you're lying. You didn't talk to the vice president and she didn't say we're acquiescing to what you want. You can have the oil, right? Why would you mention more strikes if you already got what you want? That is an indication that they didn't. And even then, so what? What does that mean when you do a second set of strikes? That means you're getting drawn in. Okay, we're going to do second round of strikes. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Did you get what you want? No. What are you going to do? A third set of strikes. Okay. What are you going to do? A fourth set of strikes. And what does that mean? That means now you're at war and you're bombing Venezuela, but you still haven't got what you want. Now, what are you going to do? Send in troops and they get shot at. Send in more troops. You get sucked in to this mountainous jungle region. And that's what the Venezuelans are waiting for. They know what you can do. You can fly over and bomb and you can throw missiles at us. Sooner or later, you got to come to us. Sooner or later, you got to come here and you got to send more troops and we'll shoot at them, which means you got to send more. You get sucked in, you get drawn in. It starts with bombing from above, but that don't work. So you got to send in a certain amount of troops and then they get shot at. That don't work. And then you get sucked in and drawn in. And before you know it, General McNamara is telling you, you know, if I just had 500,000 troops in Vietnam, I could end this in 6 months. And then you got 500,000 troops in Vietnam, but you can't end it in 6 months. And then before you know it, the Vietnam papers are going to come out that say you already knew, you always knew you couldn't win. That's the way these debacles work. That's the direction we're going. Thanks a lot, everybody. That's it for me today. I will thank everybody, even the bots and the people who are in here saying crazy things. Even I threw a couple of them aside, but let me remind you that I am very appreciative of the Patreon and the Buy Me a Coffee and the PayPal people and all of that stuff. I'm very appreciative of those who help support the channel. As you know, people who do this stuff don't really make much of anything, hopefully enough just to keep the channel going, and sometimes not even that. And of course, I got a P.O. box for snail mail people. So if you want to send some snail mail, P.O. Box 32, Glen Burnie, Maryland is right there. Whether, I mean, you can, if you do want to send a donation, highly appreciated, but people send me cards and books and all kinds of things and ties of all things. So thanks a lot for everybody who sends me snail mail. Thank you, everyone. And I think the people on my channel, most of them understand that Trump's good at press conferences. He's good at declaring victory at a press conference over the Iranians because boy, we knocked their air defense system out. Oh, we killed a bunch of the Iranian leaders. This thing is over. We're done. I was all over it. I was a great part of it. And then like 12 days later, Trump was like, yeah, I didn't really have anything to do with that. I mean, I had no idea what they did. Damn Israel is, you know what I mean? You try to tell him not to do that. And then I went in, I had to bail him out. You know, he went from I did it to I didn't do it. I was all over it. I knew everything that was happening. And then when they failed, I didn't know anything. So that's Trump. So at some point, I guess Trump will say this. You know what? At some point, this is what we'll get from Trump. You know, this was all Marco Rubio. It was his idea. I told him not to do it. I'm like, Rubio, let's don't do this. But he wouldn't listen to me. And nobody listens to Trump. Trump already knew this wouldn't work. And Rubio did. I'm firing Rubio. That idiot. That's what Trump will do. When it goes bad, he'll blame the hell of it on Rubio and everybody else. But look, but the press conference was superb. Look, based on that press conference, he won. It's over. He won Venezuela. We got all the oil. Everything's right. They're doing everything they told us. I had a phone call with Modi, and Modi said, I'm never buying Russian oil again, and all these things that the suckers believe. I ain't a sucker. I don't believe any of it. I'm from Missouri, right? Show me, brothers. Show me. I'll believe it when I see it and not until. Thanks a lot. Smash the like. Subscribe, share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.